Yes, actually after I finished writing the book and even during the course of writing this book, I kept thinking about a suitable title for this book. And my protagonist is called Kaveri, and as you know, Kaveri is the major river of Mysore state, that is South Karnataka. But there is something more to it. What made me think about this is settle on this title was that the commonality of the fates, the destinies of the river Kaveri, and my protagonist. A river really doesn't know where she is going to flow. She just makes her way through hillocks and through say gorges till she comes to the sea. She flows into the sea. She starts at a higher plane altitude and flows into the sea. And I found that my character, my protagonist, her destiny seemed very much like that, without a direction, or she had planned on something. It looked as if her family background, her education, life had fitted her out for a certain surefire end. But like a river, she finds that she just has to make her way as the course dictates. So there was a certain amount, there was a certain feeling of destiny, blind destiny, guiding both the river, this geographical entity, and my protagonist. And when I thought about it, a girl and a river, it seemed a perfect juxtaposition of the two. And my editor also agreed, and we came up with it. Yes, it is. There are two strands to it. One is about the girl Kaveri, who grows up, she and her brother, who grow up in pre-independence India, and something happens. An incident takes place which involves their participation in the freedom movement, in a demonstration against the government. And the second strand consists of her granddaughter, who doesn't know what has happened to Kaveri, and she finds a few clues. She finds a letter, she finds a few objects, and she also finds that the family stonewalls any attempts to find out about what had happened. And her father is distant, her mother is distant. She doesn't have a very happy home life. They aren't very communicative. And she understands that the answer to this lies in the past, and she uncovers what happens. No, I wouldn't say that there was less involvement. What I said that it was not as violent, as bloody as the the partition riots, the movement for independence in West Bengal and Punjab. Yes, Mysore was a princely state. It wasn't directly under the British, like Bombay Presidency or Madras Presidency. However, it's very strange when you come to think of it. Even though there was a British resident, and the Mysore, the Wadiyars ruled because of the goodwill of the British. It was the British who, after Tipu's defeat, brought the Wadiyars back onto the throne of Mysore. However, as they say, when the time for a movement has come, there is nothing that can really be done. There was a stream, there was consciousness, there were freedom songs being written in Kannada, and there was a movement which was very insistent, which was very strong, and the Mysore Maharaja, the Wadiyar, being enlightened, could see the writing on the wall. So there was a layer there. It was a layered movement, but it was definitely strong. But the movement in South India was not as violent as it was in the north, and not as direct. Directly and through a young man who was inspired by Subhash Chandra Bose and his ideas, who goes beyond the non-violent, non-cooperation movement of Mahatma Gandhi. And she gets involved, attracted to his ideas, and then gets involved in the Quit India movement, which was quite strong in places. By that time, you see the wave of freedom, the longing for freedom, the freedom movement had reached even the monarchical states, states where the princely states. So she gets involved in it. And there is a schism in her family about her involvement with this young man and with the freedom movement. And it has tragic consequences. The thrust of the narration, you see, I used I used the first person narrative for the granddaughter's voice, and I used the omniscient third person narrator for Kaveri and her brother, their part of the narration, the freedom movement, so that the two could contrast. And I wanted a certain immediacy. The young girl, the granddaughter, is lost. She is alone. There are so many things in her family that she does not understand, and the history of her country that she does not understand. So I use the first person narrative to convey the immediacy. And sorry, that is how she progresses. But the other very interesting thing that I found in writing this book, first, it is my first attempt at writing a historical narrative, you know, fictionalizing of history, where you have to retain the core of truth of what happened in history, and whatever you had to extend facts to make the plausible possible, you know, to make it actually happen. That what, given this very broad framework, the fact that Gandhi went on a yatra of many of the small towns in Mysore state in the year 1934. It was mainly for the removal of untouchability, to collect funds. What could have happened in a sleepy place, which is where people are not very much affected by these ideas of violence, overthrow? What would happen when thinking people encounter Gandhi in the flesh? This was one riddle that I posed myself. And then there were three layers that one had to go through. First, the actual happenings. Secondly, what the possibility of what could have happened. And thirdly, how does one look at those events? Because I am writing in the year 2000. So how would an author, how would I cast my eye back on those happenings? Would it be paternalistic? Would it be, you know, you wonder, you know, oh, these people who kind of went and protested and burnt their British-made clothes, and that was considered to be a very, very important way of involving yourself in a particular movement. And today, when we live in a globalized world, we wonder whether that even constituted, I mean, what was that gesture worth? You know, you think about it, was it really, were they fighting against the British? Today, knowing the way colonialism has come back in different ways, I mean, we all aspire to be Americans in some way or the other. So I kept trying to think of, you know, what would the authorial voice be? Would I be indulgent towards them? Would I think of them as mere victims? There was an interesting comment made by somebody, and they said, oh, Gandhi is the father of the family. But in this family, Gandhi's visit breaks up that family, you know, completely destroys the life of that small town. And I had never thought of it that way. You don't think of things along those lines. But willy-nilly, that is what happened. Oh, that's very interesting. See, one of the things about writing historical fiction in small town settings, particularly in India, is the lack of authentic resources. I used the government gazetteers, many of them the old gazetteers, which were again commissioned by the British. I read a lot of obscure Kannada, you know, autobiographies and small print books, some privately published accounts of Congress leaders and other people who had done a lot of social service, accounts of women who were, at that time, women were greatly, those who were involved in the freedom movement. Another thing was every household spun khadi, which was politically aware. They wore only khadi, they spun khadi. They were part of the Mahila Mandalis, which in small towns, which were involved in social service to a certain extent. So there were a lot of private accounts. accounts of small, privately published and obscure narrations, stories, and of course several gazetteers. And I spoke to a lot of people. Yes, they are available even in libraries. The Mysore Gazetteer, according to, they are chronologically arranged and they are available. You have to search for them. Well, I started research on this a long time back. Research in the sense collecting stories, talking to people. The book came out in 2006, and I started talking to people and working on it right from from 1997 or 1998 onwards in earnest, when I started looking for material, gathering it, putting together people, thinking of my characters. When I wrote it, it was very, very nostalgic, and I mixed a lot of real landmarks, real people, landmarks in Bangalore which were very famous, and the feel of Bangalore as it was in those days. And personally for me, it was a trip down memory lane. For the first time, I saw many people in my family as very real people and very courageous in their own way. People who had just been figures on a backdrop. They came alive, and you realize that it is just to go through life. There are certain people who do it so quietly and with so much quiet courage. You don't have to take a gun and shoot others or get shot at, but just the courage of doing things quietly, being principled, maintaining your other roles and responsibilities, and still living by principles, by certain principles. This was something that came home to me very, very strongly. And I know it's a cliche to say that it was a humbling experience, but truly it is. You realize that you may think of yourself as a writer, I'm writing this and I'm creating the world, but when you see these people, you see it's such a small thing, real lives lived in the challenges of those times. That is heroic, and that takes courage. I realize that.